Hey everyone, so this video is being made, quite a while after we posted our first video. Apologies for the delay, but let's get started. We'll first start with installation of both creating a new app, a Frappe app, and then setting up a React app with Frappe React SDK using Doppio. What we'll be making for this video or for this series is not an expense tracker, because I basically realized that it's going to be very simple. I won't be able to cover a lot of advanced topics, both framework related as well as related to Frappe React SDK. So what we'll be building is a linear clone. Now, building a linear clone is not that easy, because this is an extremely powerful software, beautifully designed, very difficult to make. But we'll try our best, and we'll learn along the way, how do we build really great user experiences using React, and how do we utilize Frappe to handle most of the work for us. So that's what we'll be building. If you do not have a Frappe installation set up on your laptop, I would recommend going through the installation guidelines available on frappeframework.com and set up everything that you need. So you would need, in your installation step, you would need these system requirements. We are currently going to be using the nightly version, the latest version of Frappe. So we'll need Node.js 18, Python 3.10 or above, and MariaDB 10.6.6. And so please go ahead and install this according to your system requirements. I'm on a Mac. After you've done this, then you can come back to this video, and we'll start from there. So for installation, we need to set up a new bench. We're calling this app scope. Essentially, you scope a project, right? So you create issues and then you track them. So we're going to call it scope. The front end app is going to be called scope. The back end app is going to be called scope_app, just because we want the URL to be /scope, so it's simpler. We'll get to that later, but these are basically the steps. I'll add all of this in the description or in a comment below. So and also on our new documentation site that we're setting up. So let's get started. I have a terminal over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my desktop, and then I'm going to set up a new bench. So for that, I'll have to do bench init, and I'll call this scope bench. It will take some time to set up the environment. It will get Frappe, install Frappe. It won't create a site for us. We'll have to do that. But till then, as it's doing this, let's go to GitHub and look at what we need. We need Doppio to set up a React single page app, and we'll be first getting this app as well. Let's see. Cool, I think it's done. Great. So now that we have that bench installed, let's go to that bench. It's called scope bench. So we'll do a change directory to scope bench. Now we'll create a new app. We'll call it bench new app. We'll call it scope_app, right? App name will be scope. App description will be project management made easy or something like that. Made easy. App publisher, let's call it commit company. I'll just add our email here. License would be AGPL 3.0. It's up to you. We'll make this open source anyway, so it doesn't matter. But AGPL, no, we do not need those workflow actions right now. We can set those up later. So so it's installing scope app. After this is done, so let's go back to our list. Set up new bench, set up new app called scope app. Now we need to get Doppio, right? So we'll just copy this, go back here, bench get app, and we'll clone Doppio. Great. After Doppio has been cloned, we need to set up a front end called scope with React and TypeScript. The way we do that is on Doppio, you have bench add SPA. We're just going to take this command and okay. What is the name of the dashboard? So the dashboard is basically what is the name of the React app. Now remember that our Frappe app is called scope_app. So this needs to be named as scope so that when users go to the URL, it's /scope and then they are able to look at it. So we're going to call it scope, which is the name of our React app. The app name, now this is the name of the Frappe app, right? So this should be scope_app. Which framework do you want to use? We want to use React. Configure TypeScript. Yes, we're going to use TypeScript, and it's going to create a React app for us. By the way, we'll be using Tailwind as well as Radix UI themes for this, so we'll get to it. But yeah, so it's done setting up. Now what we need to do is we need to create a new site because we just don't have any way to access it right now. So let's do a bench new site, and we are going to call it scope.test, right? Or scope.dev because we're using it for dev. You enter in your MySQL root password, it will set up Frappe. So we haven't installed scope yet. We have only created the new app, but we haven't installed it on this site, which we'll have to do later. Currently it's just installing Frappe by default. It'll ask me for my admin username and password, but let's see. Okay, admin password, I'm just going to name it admin, and it's done. Okay, now we are going to install our app. So install app, but before we can install app, we need to make this site as the default. So we're going to use scope.dev as our default site. So bench use scope.dev, and then current site set to scope.dev. Now I can just do bench install app scope_app, and this is done. Now what we could do is we can log into our site and set it up. So for that we need to do a bench start, right? And you'll see that it's running on 8015. So let's go there. Localhost 8015. Yep. And I'm going to use administrator as my login. Then it will ask me to set up everything else. Let's just call it actually I'll have to enter in an email. This is a new thing in version 15. Yeah, okay, and complete setup. So once this is done, yeah, now okay, let's skip this and let's look at, in help, let's look at the apps that have been installed. You'll see Frappe framework and scope both have been installed, right? But still what we need to do is we need to run a bench update, and the reason is because the app is still not, the React app needs to basically be installed and then built and then added to our build output directory. What I mean by that, I'll explain in a bit. So let's first let's change our directories to app/scope_app, right? And let's open this up in Visual Studio Code in our code editor. And I need you to see what Doppio has done for us, right? Scope_app was created when you created a new Frappe app, right? All of this is basically the same. But if you look at scope over here, this is a React app. It looks exactly like a React app with an src directory. This is where you'll write most of your code. But we'll go one by one. So first things first, let's look at this React app and its dependencies in package.json. You'll see that it has added Frappe React SDK and it's added Socket.io client, right? This Socket.io client we don't need, and the new version is 4.7.1, so we can remove this. Socket.io is already inbuilt in the latest version of Frappe React SDK anyway, so it doesn't matter, right? Now, next, you'll see that in our src directory, we have an app.tsx, and it's got a very boilerplate React app. These red squiggly lines, these are for ESLint, right? It's throwing a warning, no mixed spaces and tabs. For the purposes of this tutorial, we're just going to remove ESLint and its configuration over here, right? We're just going to remove it. So I can just delete the ESLint RC CGS because we don't want to complicate, this tutorial. So this React app is exactly that. It's a simple React app, but what you'll see in package.json is that the build script has been modified a little bit, right? Normally, if you set up a React app with Vite, it would say Vite build, that's it. But over here, it's also setting up a base, right? And this base is essentially inside our Frappe app. So what happens is that the React app, what Doppio is saying, look, you develop your React app separately. When we build this app, the output of this build, of this compilation process, which is essentially just JavaScript, CSS, HTML, right? All of that would actually go inside our Frappe app into the assets folder, into the public folder over here. And when we do that, we'll also copy the HTML entry for it. So what that means is we need to create a file in our www folder so that when we go to, let's say, /scope on our Frappe app, right, it serves the React app, the compiled React app. Now this is essentially what build and then this copy HTML entry are doing, right? Another thing that you'll see that Doppio has done is that it's added in hooks.py at the very bottom. It's added a website route rule. All it does is routes anything that goes from /scope, it routes it to scope. Now this is a single page app, our React app, right? So if you do /scope/tickets /scope/issues or anything, right, it will just route it to the React app, and then the React app is responsible for rendering that page however it seems fit. So this is another thing that that Doppio has added for us. One thing that we need to do though is outside, so there are two package.json files, right? One is inside the React app, inside the scope folder. The other is outside in our main directory. Over here, we need to create a post install script, right? So we need to create a post install script, which all it does is basically changes directly to scope and then installs everything inside the scope app, inside the React app as well. Why do we need it? Because when we deploy it to, let's say, Frappe Cloud, or if you're self-hosting, what Frappe would do is that it would run a yarn install on every app, right? So it would run a yarn install over here. And when it does that, after the installation is done for all of the dependencies that we add over here, which we usually never do, right? It needs to change directory to scope and also do a yarn install there. So we need to add this. After that's done, you're pretty much sorted. So to look at your dev server, so currently we have a server for Frappe that's running over here on localhost 8015. We'll run our dev server as well. All you need to do is run yarn dev, and you'll see that it's running localhost 8080 now. So let's go there. And you should see a React app, right? And it's got a simple counter. if you go to your code base and in scope, src app.tsx, and let's say you remove this wheat logo, right, it should also update over here in real time, right? So now that's done, we need to look at how would it work with Frappe. So let's close our dev server and let's run bench build, not bench build, but bench update, because we want to update everything. Requirements patch build, right? What this would do is that it would install the React app and then copy over that HTML entry. While this is happening, let's also look at the Vite configuration that has been added for our React app by Doppio. On the server, you'll see that it's added a proxy options, right? The server is only for dev environment. So when I did yarn dev and it ran on localhost 8080, this is because we've set it to 8080. In some cases, you might want it to run on another port. For example, when we are working on Raven has two React apps on the same Frappe app. One is a web app, the other is a mobile app. So on the mobile app, we have set this to 8081. So you could also do that if it's conflicting with some other installation of yours. But the most important thing over here is proxy options, which has been imported from here. If you go to proxy options, you'll see that what it's doing is that any request that goes for app or API or assets or files, it's actually routing it. Now, why do we need to do that? So when you're developing, you're on localhost 8080, right? Your Frappe app might be running on localhost 8000, so the port is different. If I do a localhost 8080/get document, whatever I'm calling an API, right, it won't serve that request because there is nothing on that server. So it needs to actually proxy all of the requests to your actual Frappe backend. And your Frappe backend, it's getting the web server port from the common site config, because in my case, it's 8015. In your case, it could be anything, right? So it's pulling that up from the common site configuration and then just routing all of the requests. One thing that I would like to do over here, and I would first check if I have it done on Raven or not, but I'm assuming we have it. Yeah, is we also need to add private over here, because you might have private files and those also start with /private. So we also need to route for those. So anyway, these proxy options, they're only valid for your dev server, right? If I go to Vite config, the other thing that you'll see is the build directory. Now, the output directory, what it's doing is it's going one folder up, which is outside scope, right? Then going to scope app, which is our Frappe app, right? Then going to the public folder, creating a folder called scope, and then outputting the build outputs over there. As I said, we need to store the actual build output inside our Frappe app so that our Frappe app can serve it. Now see, the build process is done, and you'll see in www I have a scope.html. This wasn't there earlier. And in public, I have a folder called scope, and the scope folder has index.html, which would be a compiled list, right? It's got assets, which are the compiled CSS, JavaScript, and the SVG, the React SVG that we are using. And the Vite SVG is, is hanging there. Cool thing over here though is you'll see in index.html, it has a window.csrf token, and then what looks like a Jinja template, what is a Jinja template, is frappe.session.csrf token. Whenever Frappe React SDK or Frappe JS SDK for that matter needs to send a request to the Frappe backend, it looks for the CSRF token in the window object, because you do need it to process your request unless you have CSRF disabled on your server, which you shouldn't do, right? So the CSRF token is definitely needed. And what Frappe would do on production is that it would just replace it with the actual CSRF token, because this is just a Jinja template. For more information on Jinja templating, you can look at Frappe's documentation for it. Having said that, this won't work on your dev server, right? So what we'll do is we'll start our dev server again, and I'll show that to you. So this is localhost 8080, right? If I inspect this and I go to my head and let's see, okay, sorry, it's in my body, and you should see frappe.session.csrf token. I mean, this is not an actual CSRF token. So what this means is that on our dev environment, all of our requests would fail, and we don't want that, right? The other thing that it means is that because our request is coming from localhost 8080, right, and our Frappe server is running on localhost 8015, there would also be a CORS error, right? So for both of those things, we need to update our site configuration. This is only to be done on your dev environment. So what we'll do is I'll open up a new tab and we'll go back to our bench. We'll go to sites, and then in sites, we'll edit common site config. Over here, we'll add two things. So allow CORS, and I'm just going to call it star, so it allows requests from any origin, and ignore CSRF, which I believe should be true. So this is, again, these two are only for your dev environment, right? Not to be done on production. You won't need it on production. And then you can just do a control out, and that's it. So control C, yep, and do control X, yeah. Okay, now let's look at our production site. So we have, we can refresh this. So localhost 8015, we are on /app, which is our desk interface, right? Now let's look at our React interface. So we can go to /scope, and we have a React app running over here. This is on production, right? I think that's pretty much it for our installation steps. Yep. And I'll see you in the next video where we'll set up our first few doc types. And I would recommend you to create a bunch of dummy users in your system, right? Just so that we can we can fetch those users and show them in a list or whatever. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.